Hey, I'm Mike Bruce, the founder and CEO of Visible. As you scale your company, having the right guides at your side can make all of the difference. Each episode, we'll talk to fellow founders, investors, and experts. We'll dive into their zone of genius, as well as hear about their past mistakes to give you a better chance of success. This podcast is for founders by founders. This is the Founders Forward. All right, welcome everyone to the Founders Forward podcast. Today, I'm joined by Lex Oiler. She's currently the founder and CEO of Billbox, spent her last 10 years in product design and tech, also happens to be a holistic health coach. I think we met on the best of terms. Like when I think about what I want every customer saying to me, it's what happened. Lex signed up for a trial of Visible. I emailed her a personalized note. And then she's like, this is amazing, tweeted it out. And then like 2 weeks later, I get a DM about a piece of content we wrote about fasting. And she was like, hey, this is kind of dangerous. You should tell the other side of this story. And I would love to be on your podcast. So that's how we met. Did I miss anything there, Lex?
No, that you're totally right. It was, I really appreciate good customer service. You reached out, asked if there was anything you could do to help. And the fact that you even offered to put one of your people on moving my stuff into Visible for me was very cool. I was already like pretty deep in it, but it was great. And actually, you have another question after this that I can elaborate on.
Like my question of, do you hate us?
Yeah. I don't at all. And that's why I messaged you privately. It was not I hate you or this is bad business or anything like that. But the truth is a lot of people don't know about fasting. A lot of people don't know about eating disorders. And I personally feel a responsibility to help educate people on that. And for me, when I sign up for a newsletter from a VC CRM tool, and then I get a newsletter about fasting, it's just like, are these people actually well informed on this? And it seems like no, which is totally fine. And I feel like you guys have done a good job at addressing it.
Yeah. So for some context, if people are jumping into this kind of for the first time, we did an interview about intermittent fasting. And that was included in our weekly newsletter. It was like part of a multivariant test. So I think like the headline for that 700 people got was like how fasting can provide clarity. And Lex, first of all, thank you for not publicly bashing us. It was just like you kind of tweeted it out, but didn't say who it was from or for me. So one, I think that's a great way to handle something. Thank you for that. And I decided to take ownership of it. And I just said, hey, this was us. And I actually took public ownership of it because I felt that was important. And so I guess maybe just getting right into it, because then I issued the note to people saying, hey, we're going to get to the bottom of this and talk to some other people. I had actually an overwhelming amount of people reply back and be like, hey, I've been intermittent fasting for the longest time. It's one of these great things for me. So is it that intermittent fasting is, I guess, wrong, or is it wrong for certain people? Or I guess, I'll just hand it over to you. Like, what's your whole spin or take on it?
Yeah, no, I don't think it's wrong for everybody. I mean, I don't claim to be an expert on every person's individual health, but I do think that we need to acknowledge the risks of promoting things like this. Like the truth is that eating disorders have the highest fatality rate of any mental illness, which a lot of people don't know. So we can't be flippant about sharing these things. And there does need to be, I'm not someone who's easily triggered and needs a content warning on everything. But when we are promoting things around health and wellness, especially around fasting and things that, very much do play into eating disorders, I think we need to understand who our audience is and make sure that we're being, very clear about risks involved and that kind of thing. I mean, I personally don't think intermittent fasting is good in general, but I understand that there's two sets of data that could say, it's good or it's bad. It very much, I guess, is an individual thing, but I can say that for the, tons of people who suffer from eating disorders, it's not healthy and it's, potentially fatal to be promoting content like this.
Yeah. For us, one of the things I decided to do, I guess even when we started this podcast back in the fall, was we started thinking about our audience, which is kind of two sets of people. For the most part, call it 80% are founders or kind of operators of a startup, and the other 20% are investors. And I think wellness and health for founders is important because you're more likely to be prone to depression, substance abuse, addiction. I think these things are pretty well documented. And so we said, hey, we should start thinking about highlighting things in wellness in different ways to you become a better operator or founder. Clearly, we might have missed the mark with fasting. Is there anything else you think I should be? Any other trends that you see online that you're like, ooh, that could be dangerous, or like, hey, maybe you shouldn't think about even touching that subject because it should be controversial?
I would say that the current landscape of what health and wellness looks like on the internet in general is fairly dangerous because a lot of people consider themselves health experts that are not health experts. And so you can read about this, but there's very much a trend of promoting eating disorders under the guise of other things. So promoting eating disorders under the guise of intermittent fasting, or promoting eating disorders under different diets that come out and things like that. And it's like most of these things are tricking your body into thinking that you're starving and you don't have access to food. And so for me, I'm not sure that there's a specific trend outside of health and wellness is a trendy thing that people need to be educated on before they promote it. I mean, I think I have a hard time with people who aren't experts in health and wellness using health and wellness as marketing material is my general feeling on it. But just making sure that when people are publishing content around this stuff, they've done their research and they understand the risks involved in promoting these things. Like, did you know that, eating disorders have the highest fatality rate of any mental illness? Or did you know that, 40 million Americans suffer from them? Like, things like that need to be taken into account when publishing this content.
And how much is that is on us as a company, right? Versus on, right. So, I mean, we should vet, who we have on, right? Is Lex an expert in this? And should we highlight her story or an author's book or, whomever? And how much is that left to the audience for them to make their own decision?
That's a good question. I think that there is a level of diligence that needs to be done on the person publishing it. The audience, the thing is, like, I, as an audience here, I got a headline in my email, which I'm actually not even sure I signed up for a newsletter. It might have just came when I signed up for Visible, which is totally fine. I think you guys publish good content, but it wasn't up to me to decide whether I got an email newsletter that said fasting is good for founder clarity. Now, luckily, I'm at a really good place in my own health and mental space, but me a couple years ago, that could have sent me into a tailspin. And I think, I try not to focus a ton on gender stuff, but VC culture and investment culture and stuff like this primarily is focused towards men, and eating disorders more often than not affect women. And so for me, it's like, oh, if you knew that your audience included women and you knew 5% or up to 10% of women suffer from eating disorders, you probably wouldn't have sent this. So, yes, I think that there is a level of, I am responsible for the content I consume, and which I didn't actually listen to that full podcast until I told you I would listen to it. And it was a good podcast. The majority of it wasn't even about fasting, but I didn't have a choice in consuming the headline, which in my opinion was fairly misleading or not a full picture of what we were talking about.
Thank you for that. 2 follow-ups. One, all of our users do opt into the weekly newsletter. So when you were signing up for the account, you must have checked the box. It's not opt out. I feel like that's pretty good design ethos.
Yes.
2, I do agree with you though, by the way. I told Matt, who runs the newsletter, I said, hey, we should at least avoid clickbaity headlines, especially when touching something like, food and eating and that. Okay. A couple of things. You're a holistic health coach. Any objection if we were to talk about meditation, breathing exercises, or anything around kind of like headspace, or you think that's like a safer area to explore maybe versus something that has to do with your diet?
Yeah, I think that that's totally safer. I mean, there's very few people that I think we could find information on who have died from focusing on their breathing or that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
it feels safer. And I'm also not saying that you can't talk about food or diet or anything like that. I'm saying that there does need to be like a level of research that goes into it, and potentially, even when you were publishing that podcast, or the write up in the newsletter saying, this might not work for everybody, or if you're someone who's suffered from an eating disorder or have concerns about it, here's links to some resources, that kind of thing. Just when we're talking about health and wellness, I think that there just needs to be, you have to be delicate. And I don't like to be the like snowflake person, which is how I feel like a lot of people view things like this. But it's like, no, this is life or death for a lot of people.
Yeah. And like I said, I couldn't thank you enough for reaching out. And part of that, you said, hey, Mike, I suffered from an eating disorder. And then you started publicly sharing right around this time too, kind of, this is the impetus of why Billbox was started, was like through your own trauma. So maybe kind of switching a little bit from kind of this whole health and wellness theme, which I think is directly related to what you're doing. I mean, you want to touch on why you started Billbox?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, Billbox definitely comes from like, I grew up with an eating disorder. I started restricting calories in high school around 14. By 16, I was hospitalized for many a weeks, like very on the verge of death. And from 16 to 26, like that has been an off and on thing. I'm 28 now, and I would say I'm in like a really good place with that, but I'm not sure it's something that ever really goes away. But Billbox is focused on the financial aspect of medical care and things like that. And eating disorders are typically not covered very well by insurance because the DSM doesn't have a criteria for treatment that is considered effective. And so it's like a death sentence. So insurance is like, well, none of these people actually recover from it, so we don't actually want to cover medical care for it. So my parents refinanced their home to pay for it and later filed for bankruptcy. And so I am using Billbox as a way to help people improve their financial health, which in turn improves mental health and improves physical health.
And can we get into like a little bit of like that financial piece? It sounds like that's an important part, right? It's so you're helping, from what I understand, at least when I was one, I'm an investor. We'll talk about that next. But you're improving it through helping build and establish credit. Is that right?
Yeah. So we make the process of paying medical bills easier by using texts and emails to reach patients from, when they get their first bill instead of the bill in the mail that everybody forgets about, by allowing patients to select a payment plan to pay over the course of 6 months or 12 months. And then in turn, they can improve their credit score by having that submitted to Experian and TransUnion.
I love it. And this is relatively new, right? So when did you like quote unquote start Billbox?
Yeah, so officially in November. The idea started coming together in July of 2020, but November is when I finally incorporated and was like, I'm going to take this seriously, and then talked to my manager at Mixmax early December and let him know that I was going to be leaving to spend my time on this.
Are you still at Mixmax or you're gone?
I'm still at Mixmax. I waited, my backfill started January 4th, and I said I would stay on a couple weeks to onboard her. So middle of next week is the end of my time there.
Okay, cool. I love when you hear that story where, you're starting a company and you're also like working a full-time job. Because I think a lot of times, especially like investors will say, I'm not going to invest unless you're all in doing it, 100% of your time. Like if you're moonlighting and doing something else, I'm not in. And I think we're starting to see that's actually like not the case. Like Amanda Getz, she came on the podcast starting a House of Wise. She was on, and we were talking about her. She's even splitting time right now. Half of her weeks with House of Wise and half is with Teal, and it's cool to hear other stories, because a lot of times, especially underrepresented founders, don't have the ability just to go all in on something and not get like a paycheck.
Yeah, I mean, Amanda is a perfect example of another single mom. Like, neither of us could have afforded to just quit our jobs to go full time on something that wasn't generating revenue yet, and where we couldn't cut ourselves a paycheck yet. So it is like, there is a very specific type of person who can go all in with no product and no paycheck. But if investors only invest in those people, they're missing out on like a huge market of people who are willing to work super hard to get where they're at. Even if it means, you know, for me, what that looks like is working excessive hours at Mixmax and then getting off and working until 7 o'clock, putting my son to bed, and then waking up, or then like getting out of his bed and going back to work until 2 o'clock in the morning. And so obviously that's not like long-term sustainable, but was enough for me to make sure that this was something that I wanted to do and did want to pursue full-time. I also love Mixmax so much that part of it is like, even if I could have financially done it without Mixmax, I wanted to make sure that I had something here before I decided to leave, because I've just had such an incredible time there. It was a really hard decision for me to leave my job.
Wow. Yeah. Pro Mixmax. There you go. Check it out.
Great company to work for.
There we go. I love it. We'll mention them. Maybe we can get selfishly a retweet or something from them. So Pro Mixmax. Check. I mean, their tools are great too. Like you know, integrates with Gmail and everything. Okay, so you're and you were by yourself, right? You didn't even have any co-founders at this point in November.
That's correct. Yeah, and I still don't have a co-founder. I have a team behind me, but not an official co-founder.
Not an official co-founder. So like Aiden, who I think I saw recently, is he considered a co-founder or kind of early CTO partner, or where do you consider like some of these early folks that are jumping on board with you?
Yeah, so Adrian is our CTO, but he's not a co-founder. He came on as our CTO. He starts February 1st, which is super exciting. Getting his offer letter back as an acceptance has been the most exciting part of this journey. I like danced in my kitchen, and I'm fairly low reactionary. Like, I don't get super excited about much or like super upset about much. And so I think even the people in my household were like, oh wow, something very cool must have just happened.
How did you guys get? What was that relationship like? Like, how long have you known him, and how did it all come together?
So I have followed Adrian on Twitter for about a year. He tweets a lot about hiring in the tech industry and underrepresented people in the tech industry. And he's someone that I knew we aligned on values, and he did not follow me back. And one night I had this huge list of CTO recommendations from one of our investors that I was going through. And I was just like, this isn't the person, this isn't the person, this isn't the person. And I saw him tweeting about entertaining an offer from another pretty big company. And I was like, and he didn't seem sure about it. And so I DM'd him, and this was on like a Thursday night, and was like, hey, I'm looking for a CTO if you're interested in chatting. He messaged me back right away, and we started emailing. We switched to email, and he was like, let me know when's good for you to talk. And I was like, I would get on a phone call with you right now. It was like 10 o'clock at night if you were interested. Otherwise, you let me know your schedule and I'll make it work. And I'm looking at my calendar where I have like 14 meetings a day scheduled. Like, I have no idea how I'm going to make it work, but I will cancel any of these meetings for this guy. And he was like, here's my cell phone number. So I just called him that night. We talked for about an hour and a half. He immediately understood what I was building. He sent me his resume. He had been a CTO before. He had also worked at a couple hospitals. And I was just like, this is my guy. And so I had a couple of our investors who were engineers vet him and like go through his resume and his LinkedIn, and made sure that I wasn't totally crazy, but they were like, this is a great guy. Trust your gut here. And so I extended an offer the next week, and he accepted that Friday.
Fuck, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Your team Twitter.
I'm so team Twitter. I live on Twitter.
It's interesting. I love it too. It comes up actually quite a bit in this podcast. I mean, I guess maybe that's wise because we source a lot of people from Twitter.
Yeah.
What do you love about it? And then what do you wish it had, or something maybe that's missing, or is there anything you would change about it?
I mean, their DM section is completely out of control. I wish the search function in Twitter DMs worked better. I also wish bookmarking worked better. But for the most part, I love it. I mean, most of my investors that are now on the table are people who knew me from Twitter. Both of our early distribution partners are people I know from Twitter. Every person I have brought onto the team, I know from Twitter. So, and also like I've met some of my closest friends. Like this last summer I spent in Chicago, and a girl I follow on Twitter posted a mural that she had painted, and it was of a bookstore right in front of my apartment I was in for the summer. I messaged her. I was like, are we neighbors? And like, we're inseparable now. And even though I'm back in LA, we FaceTime daily. So it's like some of my closest friends are people I've met on the internet.
It's interesting. It seems like it's like one of those things like you're either in or you're out on Twitter. And not meaning like it's an exclusive club, but it's like you kind of live there and you love it, or it's kind of like, yeah, it's not part of who I am. There's like no like middle ground, it feels like with like Twitter.
I feel like no. I disagree. I think that there are people that Twitter is like very middle ground for them. I have a friend who's on Twitter who actually just drove down from Chicago to live with me to help me with Billbox. And he's like somewhat on Twitter, but like it doesn't consume his life or really have like a huge impact. He checks it like a couple times a week. So those people exist, but I don't know. For me, the internet, I've always been like 100% in. Like I was totally the girl on Tumblr with, you know, hundreds of thousands of followers. And like, that was like my brand all from like middle school into college. And so for me, progressing over to Twitter is like not super surprising. Yeah. I love being online, and I always have.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, you know, we've been talking, so you're a designer by trade, right? And I think from what I've seen, you even have another designer on the team. How important is design going to be in terms of your experience, the Billbox, you know, organization? Is it going to be like design led? What does that look like for you guys? How are you thinking about how your expertise with design plays a role in the product and business and company?
Yeah, so we're definitely a design-led company, and I think that that's what's good for business. And I think that companies that don't bring design to the table early and often are going to get left behind, because design is so much more than what things look like. We are responsible for language and vision and how things work and how people interact with the product and how we solicit feedback and how we test things. So it's like design is just so much more than when I even started 10 years ago, and it was like, oh, let's, you know, change the color of this button or something. There's just so much more that goes into it. So design for us is everything from strategy to user research to, you know, customer support, even on like how do we solicit feedback and things like that. So for us, yeah, we're very much design led. And it's also, we're a fintech company in a healthcare use case. So we have to immediately build trust. Like if people don't trust us and we send them to a shady website where they're not sure that their money is going to like go to the right place, like nobody is going to use this. So for us, design is a way to instantly make us trustworthy, instantly show that, you know, we care about these things, and, you know, we put enough of an emphasis on what things look like that you can trust that we've like also, you know, used that same amount of like detail in data security and all of the other aspects of the product.
Trust is freaking huge. Takes forever to get and a second to lose. I literally was writing for kind of a recent product brief I was doing. The whole theme of it was like trust. Like, where can users trust us in our application and just the UX of it, and where can they not? And let's quickly identify places where users might not trust visible. And when I say trust, like, you know, do I trust that this email is going to go out at this time I said it should? Yep. And how do we fix that? Because I think it's just like there's so much now that's out in the market. It's like trust is key. I guess I don't have a follow-up question. I just want to say I agree with trust. But my follow-up question about customer feedback is what, you know, so you've done this for a living. We have a lot of founders listening that maybe aren't product, you know, designers or even SKU product. They're more technical or maybe sales. In product market fit so key early on. What have you seen work in terms of soliciting feedback? Like, how should I solicit feedback from customers or potential customers? And what should I listen to and what should I maybe discard?
Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of like how to solicit it, I think you did a really good job with Visible, and something that I plan to be very similar with on the Billbox side, which is my inbox is open. And like, yes, at some point that means someone else has to manage it for me and like keep track of it. But like you made yourself available if I had questions. And I think that's so important. So, being a leader of a company means being someone that your users can go to if they have questions or concerns. I am not a huge fan, honestly, just of the like little chat boxes that pop up on websites. To me, that's a place that I don't think is people want instant results and instant responses that way, which is something a lot of companies like can't do. And so I think that that's usually a bad user experience. But yeah, I think just being available and saying like, if you have any questions or concerns, actually, there's a great example. Carbon Health just released some sub product on vaccine distribution, and they have a box on their website. I think I tweeted about it that says like, do you see something wrong here, or like whatever, email us and let us know. And I think that that's super important, just like saying, if we got something wrong, let us know. If there's something you want to see here that we don't have, let us know.
I love that. That's a great idea. Yeah, the chat thing is interesting. We do have the intercom chat widget in our app, and we've been, but we respond within 5 minutes. Is the median response time? It's like ingrained into how we support customers. Because if I see a chat widget on a website and I start using it, I expect instant results. And so that's what we've conditioned the team and myself that like if someone writes in, we're gonna get back to you right away. But yeah, if you can't, I think it's always important to not have it. One of the funniest things in the world to me is that Intercom was like one of the pioneers of this, and at least in terms of getting it distributed all over the web. And now they don't even offer it as like support. Like anytime I write into Intercom, it takes like a week to hear back now, which is pretty ironic when you think about it. They're trying to go like all automated chatbot or whatever. So it's not great. In terms of kind of last maybe design related thing is we were talking before the recording and I was talking about co-founders or founders of a business. And I think for the longest time, the archetype of a co-founder wasn't necessarily a designer. It was maybe, someone technical paired up with a salesperson or two technical people. You're a full-fledged designer. And it seems like we're seeing more designers as founders. Why do you think that is? Or are we kind of to the point where every founding team should have a designer on it?
I mean, yeah, I would argue every founding team should have a designer on it,
Yeah.
but I understand that not everybody would agree with that, and I obviously have like some slight bias there. But yeah, kind of what we were talking about is I would say half of the people on my cap table would say I'm a technical founder, and half of them would say I wasn't, and I don't really even care, which I don't
Sure.
mean either direction there. But for me, I think a big thing that we've seen over the last few years is design being included in business strategy and having a seat at the table. And then designers realizing like we really do impact every part of the business. We impact product, we impact like strategy across the entire thing, we impact customer support, we impact retention, we impact sales. So for me, it was like I'm already doing all of these things anyways, and I'm like interacting with engineers on a daily basis, and I'm interacting with product teams and people in leadership positions, and I'm like, I'm already doing this. Like it wouldn't be that hard for me to do this with my own idea. So I think that I've talked to other founders who have design backgrounds and they feel the same way. They're like, we are a little bit of all of the teams we see at every successful startup anyways. So that means that I get to fall into a really unique CEO position where I can execute product design and I can communicate with engineers and I can write product specs and scoping docs and like basic, PM things. And I also can sell things. Like I've been selling things to engineers for 11 years when they tell, like, they're like, we can't really do that. And I'm like, let me tell you, we can do it. And this is how we're going to do it. So like, I feel like a big part of design is sales, like selling my product manager on it, selling the VP of product on it. like getting buy-in is such a huge part of design. So I think that I've excelled on the like sales side of things here because of spending 10 years as a designer.
Yeah. It's funny. I was just thinking about that. Anna, who's one of our product designers, she sits in like every meeting, like because we have product meetings, we have go-to-market meetings, and she is like on all of them because it
Yeah.
touches like every part of the business. So we touched on fundraising. I want to kind of circle back there. So you started the company in November. If you go take a look at your Twitter feed, I think there was some chatter about people saying, "Hey, look, it's so easy," or "It looks so easy how you raise money for Billbox," and that's never the case, right? I think it's always challenging to raise money, and I guess what was your process like that maybe made it appear easy, but like how have you found fundraising? And I guess maybe talk through like your process, how you approached it, and then I guess I have a follow-up question, but I'll hit pause there.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think what makes it look easy is how fast everything has moved. I think that's why people think it looks easy. That being said, like I wasn't super connected to the VC world. Like I was a product designer with a lot of like designer friends, but that was really it. And I think where Grady Tesk is an old client of mine, and he kind of summarized this really well in a tweet where he said, I like mobilized a couple people that did a lot of the work for me, and that's true. And they were people I had helped with no expectation of anything in return. They were people I had built a website for free. Like I was just like,
Yeah.
oh, you need a website? I'll build you a website tonight. And like sent it out. And those were the same people who were like, hey, here's a screenshot of my cap table. Do you want intros to any of these people? And I was like, that person, that person, that person. So, I mean, from November until now, like basically what happened is I tweeted about this idea I had and that I had been working on it lightly. And that was in November. It gained a bunch of traction. There were tons of people who were like, oh yeah, I didn't qualify for a mortgage because of a medical bill, or, I couldn't get this apartment, or I couldn't get a business loan because of a, $120 medical bill I didn't know existed. And so it was like this tweet was generating people validating the problem. And then there were people who were like, if this had come as a text message to my phone, or, people who had said, I didn't get a bill because I moved from New York to New Jersey during the pandemic and now it's in collections. Like I was like validating my idea just off of these random tweet replies.
Yeah.
And then investors became interested and they started DMing me. I think because I wasn't even a company yet, I just told them I'm not fundraising, and that immediately like then there was FOMO. Then they were like, well, when are you going to be? And I'm like, I don't know. So eventually I got on a call with Dayton Mills from Branch, and at the end of our call he was like, I will give you $1,000 to incorporate right now. And I was like, okay, I have $1,000. Like that's not the problem. I'm just like not really sure that this is like something that I want to move forward with right now. Like it was like December. I'm like, the year is ending. We're going into a holiday season. Nobody's going to be fundraising during this. And I was totally wrong. So I'm happy he pushed me in that direction. But from there, it was like he made a couple intros for me. A couple other people made some intros for me. I closed the first VC I pitched. And I also made sure I was pitching people who could be partners in other ways. So I have, a couple of angel investors who are also healthcare providers that, will be pilot partners. So just try to be very, very, very strategic. But a lot of other people did the like early work for me. They made intros for me. I didn't send a single cold email to anyone. Mostly it was people reaching out to me, or like people I know reaching out to me being like, hey, this person wants to talk to you. Can I like give them your email address? And I'm over here like, yeah, you can obviously give them my email address. Like, I don't understand this world. Like how they can reach me in my DMs. This isn't difficult. So took some calls. I took a lot of calls though. Like that's what it happened very fast, but I had 2 weeks off at Mixmax because of the holidays. And I was like, I'm giving myself 2 weeks to validate that I can do this. And if in those 2 weeks I have raised X amount of money by the end of it, then I will leave my job. And I did. I was able to do that. I brought some VCs on, I brought some angel investors on. And now we're like in the process of closing our round. I'm like still accepting commits from people, but not closing people because I want to make sure we fill this like last couple 100K with people that I'm like obsessed with. So yeah, that's been my process.
It sounds like a lot of that was like almost building in the open, right? Where you're just like, hey, I got this idea. Because it was wild that you started in November and you're here now. I had no idea who you were. And we must follow similar people or whatever, because I kept seeing you and Billbox pop up in my feed. And so I was like, oh my God, Billbox must be like the hottest company. Or like, like been around for a while, because I kept seeing chatter happening about it. And it sounds like there's a lot of that just like building in the open, and then you're just getting validation, and then these people validating your idea with their problems are already like, every investor is like, oh yeah, clearly like this is a problem, because I'm seeing everyone talk about this problem, but you, the company, which is even more validation.
Mm-hmm.
Which is crazy. And one of the coolest things I found then is you also are doing part of this round on WeFunder, which is a crowdfunding site. And that's where I participated. And I thought that was like the coolest thing in the world when you put some of this round on WeFunder. Why did you do that? Because like sometimes, there's this notion that if you have to go crowdfund, it's not a great business or whatever. Clearly that's not the case. So like, why did you put part of this round on a crowdfunding site?
Yeah. So, I mean, super early on, I had people interested in investing who weren't accredited investors. And I was like, I mean, I'm very outspoken on Twitter about just like gatekeeping in general. So it was like not surprising that I had a problem with accreditation status being required. Yeah. And then I did a lot of research on why those things existed. And it's like, oh, these are laws that went into effect during the Great Depression so that people, weren't screwed over. And, it's not, accreditation statuses are supposed to go away anyways because of the Jobs Act that Obama put into place, but the SEC is so slow about everything that it just hasn't happened yet. And so I was like, I would like to open this up. But the other reason is because a lot of investors want you to raise a friends and family round first. They're like, if people who know you don't believe in you, then like, why should we? But they don't take into account that the majority of people don't have accredited friends and family. Like, I'm building a company after saying my parents filed for bankruptcy over a hospital stay. Like, these are not people who, make $200,000 a year or have $1 million net worth. So for me, it was just like, I'm going to throw this up. That being said, WeFunder was a ton of work.
It's
The setup process of that was like harder than like anything else in this process. It was very time consuming. I would have started way sooner if I had known how time consuming it would be, but it was really tough. That being said, I raised $70,000 there, driving no ads to it. I've done nothing. They give you a playbook of things to do to like increase, investment there. And I did none of that. Like, I just went through what they require you to do.
Yeah.
And I mean, raising $70,000 from like mostly just my friends and like people on Twitter who I know has been very validating, and like, oh, clearly this is a problem, and like everyday people view this as a solution that they would want to use. So, I mean, I had a couple of VCs that I talked to that were like, hey, would you get rid of your WeFunder and refund all of that money if we came on board? And I was like, no, I wouldn't. These are people who want to be involved, and these are people I want involved.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that idea. I think we're seeing variations of this too, becoming more popular, where a founder is kind of taking a part of the fundraise and creating like an SPV or a WeFunder or whatever, and giving access to other founders or like smaller check sizes. And those, and there's this whole idea of like the inverse of like, the smaller the check size, typically it's like usually those people help you way more than even like the bigger, investors in the round. And there's like this whole thing with that. So really cool that you did that. I thought that was like super innovative. I think we're going to see more of it. So kudos to you for doing it. Because I do know that there's a lot, since you're removing the accreditation piece, there's a lot of work that goes into the founder to spin up a campaign on We Fund Real Republic or whatever the the different
Yeah.
sites are. So I know it's not like you can just go put your pitch deck on there and call it a day. There's a lot you got to go through. So
yeah,
awesome.
it's not like Kickstarter at all. Like you have to like really prove a lot of stuff to be able to do this.
Yeah. One of the last things, kind of just wrapping up here, is you mentioned you're a holistic health coach. I would love just to talk about that for a little bit. How's that translated into you as a person in your journey, and I guess what is a holistic health coach?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll be honest, like I do very little health coaching and did very little even after getting certified. I don't really love one-on-one work, so it wasn't super great for me. But I went through that because I really needed to leave tech. Like I was like, I am living in this like fake universe bubble, and I felt like I wasn't contributing anything super meaningful to the world. At the time my sister was working, she was a surge tech working on like emergency labor and delivery, and she's my younger sister, and there definitely was this weird part of me that was like, oh, she's like saving lives and I'm building productivity software.
Yeah.
Like I don't know, I just went through like this like really soul crushing like, is this really what I'm doing with my life? And obviously like eating disorders and addiction and mental health and stuff like that had always been super important to me, and it's something that traditional medicine has done not a great job at addressing. So, and I also was never going to go to med school, so that was like the other reason that wasn't going to work. But yeah, I just needed a break, and it was a 9-month program, and if nothing else, I was like, this will be useful for me. But my plan there was to use what I learned during that time to help build like a healthier workspace and work environment. We talk a lot about like culture at workplaces, and nobody seems to, well, I guess that's changing now, but for a long time, like nobody included health in that. They were like, oh, we've got beer on tap and wine on tap and like a ping pong table, and this is our culture. And it's like, cool, we're all working 16-hour days and sleeping under our desks, and like this isn't sustainable and this isn't healthy. Like, what are we doing here? So
Yeah.
I just wanted to step away, get educated, and come back to tech in a way that I could really provide like value to the teams that I worked on. And it's something that now building Billbox, I'm so happy that I did, because it's like, these are things I can build into our company culture. And what that means is like, what is a healthy like life work balance, and what is sustainable, and I have mandatory time off for my employees. And I think that's a huge thing. Like we talk a lot about like unlimited time off, and it's like, cool. I had that at Mixmax. I took 2 days off the entire time I'd been there. So having mandatory time off and things like that, making sure that we're looking at health. And I mean, Billbox is like based on holistic health. It's mental health, physical health, financial health. And so holistic would also include spiritual health in there for people who buy into that or whatever. And I don't really know where I land there, but I have my own spiritual practices. And by that, I mean, I have a prayer candle right here and like a deck of tarot cards. But like looking at like full body humans and treating them like humans. And so I'm really excited to be able to lead a company where I'm final say on things. And that means like, I love the idea of like the buck stops with me. And like obviously like there's investors involved in this and that, but I've been able to pick those people very strategically. But like, yeah, I want to know that if the people who work for Billbox are not healthy and it's because of our work environment, it's something I have full control of changing. And I just hope, and this is one of the first things I say when we're hiring or interviewing people, it's like, if there is ever a point that like something isn't working and we are ruining the life part of work-life balance, like you can come directly to me. Like it is really important to me that as we're building this health-focused company, that like translates into how our company looks and acts and works.
What are some of the practices you took from that 9-month journey of holistic health and applied to the workplace? Like, so mandatory time off. Is there anything else, maybe unique or maybe that's not standard that you see that you're trying to bring in as part of that like holistic practice?
Well, we have, so the office space in my backyard, which will eventually be the Billbox headquarters, so we can all work together in person. There's an extra room in the back that like I've put my spin bike in, and that was a gym before and will be a gym again, and letting people have that. Parental leave is a big one. Letting people decide their own work hours to some extent. Like, obviously, we're a startup, which means we all have to work together very closely, but like, I'm someone who works better in the evenings. And so, having people be able to set when their like core focus hours are. And, even though we have core work hours where we have meetings scheduled during that time, like when it's focus time and like heads down work time, that people can pick those times themselves. The other thing is I have added a therapy stipend into our benefits, like on top of health insurance. Like there is a separate therapy or coaching or counseling stipend. So that's something that Mixmax has in their work-life balance package, and something I took advantage of. And we actually had a diversity and inclusion group come in and do something at Mixmax, and one of those people became one of my counselors. And so making sure that we are prioritizing that, and then giving people 2 hours a week off for whatever that means to them related to their like mental, spiritual, physical health.
It's amazing. Well, I can't thank you enough, Lex, for coming on, sharing your story. I know some of that's not easy. Thanks for DMing me and everything we've done on Twitter together. Really looking forward for you guys for launch and be part of this story. So thanks so much for coming on, and I'll see you on Twitter.